I think we're going to get started real quick. Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see all these faces this Friday morning. Let's see. We're going to do some quick introductions and then and move into our morning. I'm Laura Brownell. I use she, her pronouns, and I am coming to you from the Lacey area, which is the occupied land of the Cowlitz, Nisqually, the Coast Salish, and the Squaxin Island tribes. I'm going to now pass it to Nicole to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Lohr, she, her pronouns. I'm coming to you from the Spokane area and the traditional lands of the Spokane tribe, and I work with DCYF ECAP, and happy to be here. All right, and I will pass it off to Dr. Rosemarie Allen.
Hello, everyone. I am Rosemarie, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am waving to you from the sunny but cold Denver, Colorado.
Jess, I'm going to pass it to you for so you can introduce yourself and do our land acknowledgement this morning.
Morning, everyone. My name is Jess Hansen. I use she, her pronouns. I also like to be doing the land acknowledgement this morning. I come from the traditional lands of the Squaxin, Coast Salish, Cowlitz, and Nisqually people. And I would like to pay my respect to the elders, both past and present. I also live in Olympia on the wonderful, beautiful snowy side of the Olympics.
Thanks, Jess. All right. Thanks, everyone who are introducing themselves in the chat box as well. We're so glad to have all of you here. Before I pass this off to Dr. Allen, we want to make sure that folks have their phones connected to their video. We'll be in small groups throughout the day, and if you are not connected, then your audio and your video will be in two separate rooms. So I don't see anybody who that's a problem for, but if for some reason you get split up, just you can let Jess know, and Jess will help us, get you in the right places. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Allen. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I am going to share my screen, and we're going to get started. Please keep in mind that we want to be interactive, so feel free to use the chat box as much as you like in order to ask questions or provide feedback. And I will answer as much as I can during the presentation. I'm seeing some of you from the last session, so I'm so glad that many of you came back. Today we're going to be talking about implicit bias and colorblind ideology. And as we start these conversations, it's really the beginning of this equity journey. And as we begin to talk about sensitive subjects, I just want us to agree that this is a safe space. And being a safe space, it doesn't require perfection. It actually requires big risk and vulnerability and a willingness to be open and a willingness to grow. And this is also a space where we allow each other the space and the grace to grow. I mean, that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things that are wrong. We're going to use the wrong pronouns. We're going to use the wrong labels. We're going to microaggress because we're human and we're imperfect. So one of the things that I want us to talk about just a little bit that I'd like to just highlight some basic understandings and assumptions. We're going to talk about race and racism and bias and just the state of our world today. And it's really, really important for us to understand that none of us created this. None of us. I was talking to a guy once and he goes, I've never, ever in my life owned a slave. I said, that's amazing because I've never, ever in my life been one. You've never owned slaves. I've never been a slave, but here we are. dealing with the residual effects of racism, some of which stem from slavery. So we didn't create this mess, but we do have a responsibility to clean it up. So this is a space of no blame, no shame. We're all in this together, but no one created it. So we're not going to blame each other. We have a personal and professional responsibility to correct it. And where you are is okay. Where you are is okay. Some of you are just beginning this journey. Some of you are experts in this journey. But the reality is when you know better, then you must do better. So first, I'd like to know where you are in this equity journey. So I am going to put a link in the chat box, and I just want you to click on it, and it's going to take you to a Jamboard. Let me share it. And if you've never used a Jamboard before, right here is where you can make a sticky note, and then just put a sticky note and put kind of where you are. So for me, I'd make a sticky note and I'll say, that's me. And then I will put it right over here. Okay, great. I see somebody's working on it. Somebody says, I'm working on it. I'm about here. Someone else is learning. I'm about here. Yes, go ahead and move those around. Let's see where we are. And I love this because it gives us an idea. Oh, that was weird. Well, something happened and we lost some of it. Interesting. Let's see if I didn't go to another page.
In the chat box, it was saying too many people were on the file, so they won't let everybody on.
Okay.
That's what's happening.
Get an idea, yes. So what I'm seeing is that most people are beginning at the beginning, like, huh, what is this about, to the intermediate. I'm around here, I'm staying curious, I'm learning a lot, I'm here, working on it around here. Great, this is really, really good stuff. Really gives us an idea of where people are. All righty. So we know that we have few experts and we're all growing. And even if you felt like you were at that expert stage, there's always room to grow. This is a journey that we are continuously on with absolutely no destination. If you feel like you've arrived, then you're in really, really, really big trouble. Some things make me hot, but I feel like I'm growing a lot and tolerating almost everything. So, okay, I'm seeing where you are in the chat box as well. So when you enter this journey, there are 5 levels of equity work. And there's the first level is the individual. And that's where you become aware and fight your own biases. And then it's the interpersonal, when you learn how to deal with racism when it happens in your interactions or when you witness the interactions with other people. And then this community level, and that's being accountable to the communities that you're serving that's impacted by racism. The institutional is when your agency's commitment to equity is consistent with the actions. And then the 5th level is systemic, when we really, really, really began to look at policies and practices that harm Black, Indigenous people of color. But today we're right here. We're going to talk about racism and bias at the individual level. Now, I want to just say that in the 60s, 70s, when implicit bias training was first initiated, it was really rooted in the civil rights legislation. And it was in response to litigation. People were being sued for being biased. So because the Civil Rights Act title of 1964, Title VII, prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. And what happened, believe it or not, in the 60s, we were just beginning to integrate. So people were working with people that they've never worked with before, didn't know a lot about. And people were being sued because they were being, agencies were being sued because they were discriminating. So implicit bias and diversity training was not really designed to ensure equity, but to avoid litigation. So that's why the original diversity and implicit bias training really doesn't work. It doesn't work because it was never designed to work. Some of the pitfalls is that they focused on the individual. So it was individual, it was that person. Many times the implicit bias training was mandatory. Right here in Colorado, it is mandatory that police officers take 2 hours a year of implicit bias training, and this is how they show up. And some sit like that the whole 2 hours. I got so disgusted with it that I finally stopped training most law enforcement agencies because it was mandatory. It was punitive. If they didn't show up, they could get their pay docked. And then it relied on bridging this intent action gap where I didn't mean to, even though that was my actions and that was the result. And it doesn't really address the institutional and systemic racism that lives in almost every single institution. So the training that you're getting now and many other types of diversity, anti-racism, anti-bias training, it first focuses on the individual like we're doing today. And then the focus is on the organization and the biases that are inherent in the systems and processes. And then we approach that system with a critical lens so that we could identify where bias might be impacting the mission, vision, and values of the organization. Any questions about that so far? So again, implicit bias training in and of itself really doesn't work. We have a lot of work to do to stay on this journey to impact change. So let's talk about implicit bias. So even though we believe with our whole hearts that we see and treat people as equals, science tells us we don't. The reality is that we don't, that our hidden, unconscious, implicit biases definitely impact how we see and treat people. But we're early childhood folks for the most part. So why do we need to talk about this here? Why in early childhood? And it's always shocking to people that we have to talk about it in early childhood because we're here because we love children and we love working with families and we really, really, really want to make a difference. But even in early childhood programs, we see how bias impacts everything we do. So we see, and I know many of you know, the racial disparities that persist, for instance, in discipline, in suspensions and expulsions. What we know is that young children are suspended. Children are suspended very young and very often. A lot of children are suspended. In my research, they're suspended around 8 months of age. 8 months. Can anyone guess why 8-month-olds are being suspended and expelled from child care programs? Let's put it in the chat box. Why do you think at 8 months? Biting, absolutely, Kathy. Biting is number one, yep. What's the second most common reason? So biting, not quite hitting, not quite attendance. It is, dun, da, da, crying. Absolutely, Jen and Nicole, crying. So babies are being kicked out of childcare for crying and for biting. They're two top jobs. Babies cry. That's what they do. They don't have the language to express their feelings. Babies cry and babies bite. So yeah, so they're getting kicked out of childcare, especially kicked out for crying and excessive crying and biting. And preschool children are suspended 3 times more than K-12 combined. And we're only talking about state-funded preschool. So I don't know if you all in Washington have a state preschool program, but the data here does not include childcare, family childcare homes, Head Start, private preschool, but just state-funded preschool. And some of you have seen this statistic and you go, yeah, I knew that. But I want you to think about what that means. I want you to think about all the children who are suspended from kindergarten, all the children who are suspended from first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, all those children. Then I want you to add those up and then add it to all the children who were suspended from middle school. And a lot of kids get suspended from middle school. And then take those two numbers. Now you've compiled elementary, you've compiled middle school. Now take those numbers and add it to high school. Imagine all the children suspended from high school. You combine those numbers, multiply it by 3, and that's how many children are suspended from preschool. Now, what we also know is that across all settings, every single day, a preschooler is suspended or expelled every day. And there's inequity in terms of who gets suspended. And what we know is that there are patterns of racial and gender disproportionality. First, we know that boys are suspended, and boys are suspended a lot. They're just a little more than half of the preschool population, but 78% of those who are suspended, boys. And then we know that Black preschoolers are suspended a lot. They're almost 4 times more likely to be suspended in preschool than their white friends. Dr. Walter Gilliam said there are 3 risk factors for being suspended: being a boy, being a big boy, and being a Black boy. So if you're a big Black boy, chances are you're going to get suspended. I added a D to Dr. Gilliam's work. And I said, if you're a big Black boy with a disability, then your chances skyrocket. They are the most suspended in education across the board. And then there's this growing trend of African-American girls who are suspended. They're only 20% of the female preschool population, but more than half of those who are suspended. Can anyone guess why little Black girls are suspended? Go ahead, use your chat box. What are the 2 main reasons that Black girls are suspended? Feisty. Mari, you're right. Seen as more, oh my goodness, you guys are hitting it, all of it. Talking behavior, and we summed it up to sassiness. Sassiness, having a tendency not to be quiet. I love the way that you said that. Carol said spirited. They're suspended for sassiness. Adultification rate is a big, big deal, and we're going to talk about that in our 4th session. But African-American girls are suspended for being sassy, for their attitudes, for their behavior. Can anyone guess the number 2 reason? This is a little tougher. Number 2 reason. Oh my goodness, Mary, hair. Emmeline, hair. They are suspended for their hair. The way they wear their hair. One little girl was sent home because her mother put coconut oil in her hair, and the teacher said her hair was stinky and distracting. Violations of dress code because of hair. Black hair has become such an issue in terms of discrimination that 7 states have passed laws called the Crown Act that doesn't allow you to discriminate against people who wear their hair naturally. Now, I'm a Black woman. You are my audience today, so I'm going to tell you a couple of secrets. We're really number one rule when it comes to Black women and their hair. Can anyone guess the number 1 rule, Black women and hair? Don't touch it. Number 1 rule about hair. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. I can't say that enough. Don't touch it. Don't ask to touch it. Don't get close enough. Don't almost touch it. Don't touch it. And that is almost a universal rule across the board. I don't know where it came from, but generally speaking, most Black children, when they leave home on their way to school, their mamas tell them a couple of things. Be good, do all your work, Try hard, do your best, and don't let nobody touch your hair. Don't let nobody play in your hair. Come back here with the same number of bows and barrettes and beads that you left with. I was so curious about this rule and where it came from. I did a little research, like, where did this come from? Why is it so big? Our men don't even touch our hair for the most part. I mean, and they just know better. It's not even a let me touch it. But I found a video, if you ever want to see it, on YouTube called The History of Black Hair. And what I learned is that during enslavement, if the enslaved African was going to run away, that cornrows were used. Those of you know cornrows, some people call them French braids. Have you ever seen elaborate styles of braiding? That those cornrows were used first as a road map. So if they were going to escape, the map would be braided in their hair. But also food was braided in the hair for sustenance. So on these journeys, the food was braided in the hair, rice, grains of rice, bread, so that they would have nourishment on their journey. And so I just wonder, and this is just a Rosemarieism, but I just wonder if that was the beginning of don't touch my hair, because you couldn't afford for someone to touch it and find the hidden food. But anyway, it's really, really interesting. But little Black girls are suspended for being who they are, for being sassy, and for their hairstyles. Here's a suspension waiting to happen. Take a look.
Say cheese. Cheese.
Did you see that look? Did you see that hand? I'm going to play it again.
Say cheese. Cheese.
Oh no. I'll tell you, as a Black woman, you learn that move very early in life. Now just imagine if that little hand didn't move. And she, in her head, don't let nobody touch your hair. You better come back here with all those beads. Can you imagine if she pushed that child's hand away? Who would be in trouble? She would. And if it continued to happen all day, the teacher might even say she hit 4 children today without noticing that she was just simply pushing their hands away from her hair. So after about the 5th time, can't you imagine that child might be suspended? You've hit 4 children today. And can you imagine if you didn't know these cultural norms, you wouldn't think it was a big deal? I had a little guy who was 7 and was suspended for 3 days simply because he didn't sit in his seat. And the teacher even said, he's so compliant and he's so, I mean, I've never had trouble with him. I just don't understand. My first question is, why didn't you ask? Because it turned out he didn't sit in his seat because all the little girls around him who were white kept patting his afro. And he kept saying, I just felt like a puppy. They just kept patting my hair. And the teacher said, well, what's the big deal? It's only hair. But when you don't understand cultural norms, it's more than just hair. That was a really, really big deal. Someone says for parents, for brown girls, put a lot of time and money for the hair, absolutely. If not made at home, very expensive to maintain. I can tell you, just really, really quickly, the whole idea about water. I paid $40 for my daughter to get her hair washed and pressed. She was going to California the next day. We got out of the car. Our friends were having a water fight and they wet her up. It's like, oh my goodness, because what happens when you straighten Black hair and water hits it? That's it. Afro. So all of a sudden her hair was just an afro, which would have been okay, but we had it pressed for a special occasion. But I could talk to you all day about Black hair, but that is one of the reasons that little Black girls are suspended. Now, what we know is that American Indian and Alaska Native children are suspended disproportionately too. The boys are more likely to be suspended than their white friends, and girls are nearly 4 times more likely to be suspended for girls in the same age, although these data are inconsistent across states. Now, Latino children, they're not disproportionately suspended in early childhood, but they are overrepresented when they hit K-12. And many times, especially Latinas, they are suspended for some of the same reasons Black girls are, that they're thought to be sassy and loud and things like that. Children with disabilities are not overly represented in preschool suspensions, but once they get to school age, they're twice as likely to be suspended than typically developing peers. And when we look at these data, and some of you are really surprised by it, we have to ask ourselves why. So Alan said, one of my daughters had people touch her hair when it was long. It's blonde, but it was curly and the texture was mixed. Some was like that of someone who was mixed. She didn't like it, but she didn't know what to do about it. It's so amazing you say that, Alan, because we teach our children very early to say, oh, I'd rather you not touch my hair. Please don't touch my hair. And I told my daughter that, and my son who had locks, you can blame it on me. My mom will get really upset if you touch my hair. That really helped them. So why are children being suspended, and why are they suspended at disproportionate rates? First is teachers need the tools and support to prevent and address challenging behaviors. And it's really as simple as that. Not only do they need the tools, but they also need the support. Is there anyone here who is in leadership in early childhood programs who support teachers? Julie, coaches, directors. Okay, I see some of your hands coming up. All of you. I was a teacher. I taught 3-year-olds for forever, it seemed like, because it took me almost a lifetime to get my brain cells back. Because anybody who worked with 3s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But then I spent a great portion of my career as a director. And may I say to you, as directors, as much as we believe we know what's happening in the classroom, we don't. And for those of you who have been out 5 years or longer, we really don't. Oh my gosh, when one of my teachers went on maternity leave, I thought, I've been out of the classroom too long. I'm not going to hire a substitute. I'm going to go in and I'm going to be there for the 8 weeks that she's out. Lord have mercy. Oh my goodness. The things I thought I knew because I'd pop in and read a story, cover for somebody to go to the bathroom, all of those things I thought, nothing in the world like being there 9 hours a day. I forgot I needed to extend my bladder. I forgot what it was like to wait for somebody to go to the bathroom. I forgot what it was like to have a child who pooped, had an accident in the bathroom, another one with paint all over his face over here, and another one crying, and 2 others crying in the corner. I forgot that you had to have, people say, eyes in the back of your head, on the side of your head, on top of your head, on your butt. You needed eyes everywhere so that you could see everything. And those 8 weeks were so enlightening. It changed how I supported people. I remember when I was a teacher, and mine was a self-contained 3-year-old classroom. And if you work with 3s, you know that there should be a law against having only 3-year-olds, because there are no 4-year-olds to tell them you can't do that. 3-year-olds need that 4-year-old child in leadership, usually a girl, to say, you're not supposed to jump on the table. I'm telling, you need those tattletales. Believe me, you do, because those are your other eyes. But I remember when I had all those 3-year-olds, and they were everywhere. And I know that 3-year-olds, they feed off of each other. I was observing a classroom at Clayton with Brenda, where she was, and there were 3-year-old boys under the water table trying to take out the plug. And I thought, if they succeed, this is going to ruin her entire observation. And those of you who observe, you know you're supposed to be real quiet and not interrupt anything. But I just kept watching them pluck and pluck. And the other would say, get it under here. And one says, maybe I'll go get something out of the block area. I mean, they were just planning and plotting. So I eased over there and I just said, excuse me. I don't think your teacher would appreciate it if you take that plug out. One of them, you're not the boss of us. And the other one, you're not us, teacher. And the other one, we don't have to listen to her. They just ganged up on me, and the poor teacher was looking at me like, why did you interrupt my observation? So teachers need the tools, but they also need the support. When I was in the classroom, when my class was wild, I was afraid my director would come in and think everything was out of control. And as out of control as it looked, I still had a handle. So what we need to do is make sure we're supporting teachers, not judging teachers, really with that basic understanding of what it's like to be in the classroom 9 and 10 hours a day. So teachers need the support and they need the tools. But we also, as difficult as it is, we have to understand the role of implicit bias. So Ray said that those of us who work at the state level to support teachers and family staff, but are seldom or never in classrooms, need that reminder. Yes, the reality of teaching. I'll tell you, I have about 1 million jobs, but I'm a contractor for the state, and we license and monitor childcare facilities. All of my staff, my CFO, my COO, executive director, and supervisors, they have to go into facilities 4 times a year, because you can't support an organization financially if you don't understand the work of your team. So even at the state level, if you can get in there, see the programs you support. Even when I was at the state, I ran state licensing for years. Everyone who worked in our department had to go into the classroom. There's a state, I wish I could remember which one it is, where their licensing specialists have to do 2 weeks, a two week stay in a classroom so that they can understand childcare a little bit better. So here we are, and I hope people at the state didn't mind me saying that, but it's really a great idea. So implicit bias is a huge factor. But let's talk about what implicit bias is. It is this mental process that results in how we feel about others based on how we perceive their difference, based on categories of diversity. It could be race, age, appearance, all of that. It's an unconscious process that we are not aware of. It's totally in our unconscious brain, but it's based on biases that have developed over our lifetime. So I want you to imagine that in your core, about right here, that you have a recording device, and everything that you've seen, felt, experienced, heard, smelled is recorded on that internal recording. So just for instance, let's just say your mom took you shopping and parked the car in front of the house, got you out, put you in her arms, and she's about to walk into the house to take you in. But right as she's getting you out of the car, she has you in her arms, a big, brown, vicious dog runs up, starts barking and baring its teeth, barking, barking, barking. Your mom is screaming, 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 but she's holding you tighter and tighter, and she's kicking at this dog, and she's screaming, and the dog is barking, and it's a terrifying, traumatic experience. But you're 4 months old. You don't remember that. But here you are now at 24 years old. You're walking across the supermarket parking lot, and a big brown dog walks past you, even on a leash. All of a sudden, you have a reaction. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden, you find that you're terrified of that dog. You don't know why. But it's likely that that experience at 4 months is influencing how you respond to big brown dogs at 24. Although you have no memory of the experience, it's on that internal recording. And that's where implicit bias lives. Implicit bias supports stereotypes and negative experiences, positive experiences too. But we have to be aware of it. And again, it's based on dimensions of diversity. And I know this is really, really small. There are cultural dimensions like ethnicity, ability, gender, gender identity, age, sexual orientation, social class, religion, and then all of our isms, racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, classism, and then our personal contextual factors, genetics, family history, personality, education, lived experiences, the historical, the systemic, the historical, sociocultural, political, economic, and then our relationality. Family, friends, community, ancestry, heritage, those are all the dimensions of diversity that we can also, right here, develop implicit biases about. So I want us to be aware of that. Now, I said that there are many, many, many categories of diversity, but today we're focusing on race. And people have said to me, oh, Rosemarie, it's not only about race. What about class? What about ability? What about poverty and all of that? And I say, you're so right. It's not only about race, but it is always about race. I'm gonna say that again. It's not only about race, but it's always about race. And why do I say that? Because on every single indicator of child well-being, Black and brown children are at the bottom. No matter how you slice that pie, poverty, Black and brown children are at the bottom. Ability, Black and brown children are at the bottom. Educationally, Black and brown children are at the bottom. It's like, no matter what it says. So we have to talk about race so that we can address this problem. So implicit racial bias resides in your unconscious brain. And this yellow section right here, unconscious attitudes are less egalitarian than we explicitly think about race. All this is saying is that we all think we're better than this. I mean, who wants to think that they're biased or racist? No one. We want to believe we're better than this, but we're not yet. We will be when we do the work, but we're not yet. Oh, I just saw pop up in the chat, powerful recast. Oh my goodness, I think it's on my bookshelf back there. If you want to learn about race and racism, recast, although it is a very, very hard read. I had to put it down about 10 times. Now this gray area, our refusal to talk about and confront issues of race reinforces racial bias. Anybody ever been in the company of someone who says, the more you talk about race, the more racism there's going to be. The less we talk about race, the less able we are to confront issues of racial bias. So it's important to understand the causes of implicit racial bias so that we can do the intentional work that it'll take to mitigate the negative consequences, so that one day, hopefully in our lifetime, Black and brown children won't be at the bottom. That one day, because of the work we do, that race will not be the biggest single predictor of how people will do in society. Do you know that race is the biggest predictor of how people will do in society? I'm a Black woman. My race determines if I'll die in childbirth. People who look like me, women who look like me, are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth. My children, because I'm Black, are much more likely, I have to believe 2 to 3 times more likely to die during their first year. I'm more likely to have heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure. My mom died at 56 of a heart attack in her sleep. My sister died at 44 because of a heart attack in her sleep. My sister, my closest sister, just died 18 months ago because of a stroke in her sleep. That's, as a Black woman, my race dictates what happens. It dictates where I live. It dictates if I'll get a mortgage loan. We went to buy a house with my son. For my son, our credit scores are over 800, all 3 of us. We had enough money in the bank to buy the house outright. 2 banks turned us down. One said, oh, we didn't like the way that person verified your income. And one of them just outright said, you have so many sources, we couldn't figure it out, and denied us. Racism in banking. This is real, and this is why we have to talk about it. So let's look at how implicit bias works. And I like to use this ladder of inference because it shows, just as a graphic, how fast we engage in implicit bias. There are a couple of factors where we're most likely to engage. It's when there's fear. When you're afraid, you're more likely to engage in implicit bias. When you have to make snap decisions, you're more inclined to engage in implicit bias. And when you don't have enough information. So this is the way this ladder works. You climb it from the bottom like every ladder. First rung, I select data from what I observe. Second step, then I add meaning to what I see that is cultural and personal. And then I make assumptions based on the meaning I made up. It's right here that you make stuff up. And then you draw conclusions based on the meaning you added, the assumptions you made. You adopt beliefs about the world or a person, and then you take action based on those beliefs. And this happens in milliseconds. You don't know you're doing it. You have no idea. Do you know that every single person that you come in contact with, you size up immediately? Everybody, you size up. I try to bring it to my consciousness because I'm looking at some of you. And I know I've sized some of you up. I see a male with a hat on and glasses. Raise your hand there, Tim. No, gray shirt. Nope, he's just looking. With a hat on. Assumptions are difficult. So I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, wow, he's probably really progressive. And I'm thinking that he's been involved in this anti-racist work for a while. I'm guessing that he's probably in a leadership position. I've made up all kinds of things about a little square in my box. We do that, and we do it all the time. So let's see how this might work in real life. Here's observable data. Rosemarie walks right in. She didn't speak to me. Did you know that speaking was cultural? Some of you were taught that your job when you walk in a room is to speak to everybody there. But some of you were also taught when you walk in a room, you don't make yourself the center of attention and you wait for an appropriate opening before you talk. You don't call attention to yourself. How were some of you raised? Anybody? I was raised to speak when I walk in a room. If I walk into my mom's house and she's there with all her girlfriends or her sisters, not only must I speak, but I must hug. Hi, Auntie Pam, hug, hug. Hi, Auntie Nat, hug, hug. Anybody else raised like me? When you walk into a room and you have to speak, go ahead, put it in chat box. Walk in and always say hello. Yep. Now, how many of you were raised to not do that? That people may be talking and you don't interrupt. Angela said, keep quiet until I was talked to, not bring attention to yourself. Imagine the cultural disconnects between those two. Wow, walk in and say hello and hugs. This is cultural. And do you know this has caused plenty of problems in the workplace? I have a hallmate at the university. She walks in, goes into her office and doesn't say a word to anybody, but she leaves her door open. And when she leaves, she doesn't say goodbye. That's the other thing. You don't ever leave a house without saying bye. I didn't think she liked anybody, but she went to one of my workshops and we were right here talking about this. And she goes, I could not understand for the life of me why you would walk in and say hi to everybody in their office all along the way. Hi, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Oh, you look cute. That's what I do. She said, I never felt worthy to do that I'd leave my door open and anyone who wanted to speak to me would come in and speak. You see the cultural disconnect? And I said, is that also why you don't say bye when you leave? She goes, yes. I said, I honestly thought it was rude. I come look for you and you packed up and gone for the day. And I thought it was disrespectful that you didn't even say bye, I'm leaving. Cultural disconnects. So look at this. I love what's happening in the chat box right now. So because I was raised to speak when you walk in a room, I'm going to add personal and cultural meaning. Rosemarie rushed right past us and she didn't even speak. Did you see her? Oh, she had an attitude. You know what? I don't think she likes us. I make assumptions. She thinks she's better than us because she's a director and we're just assistant teachers, that she doesn't even have the courtesy to speak. It's like we're nothing. And then I draw conclusions based on my beliefs. She's not going to treat us fairly. She doesn't even see us. I bet she doesn't even know our names. And you go up that ladder in a matter of seconds. Here's another one. Observable data. It's a really big child, a big boy. Let's say a big boy. Ooh, girl, look at that boy. He's big. I can't believe he's 4. We'll talk about adultification later. He looks more like he's 8. And you know what? He's almost muscular. My goodness, look at him. And then I add personal and cultural meaning. That's a big boy. And did you notice when I spoke to him, he didn't even speak? Cultural speaking. Girl, he didn't speak and didn't even smile. I think he has an attitude. We're going to really have to watch him. And then I make assumptions. Oh, girl, look how big he is. And he's not friendly and didn't speak. He's probably going to be aggressive with the other kids. And heaven knows if he hurts one of them, what'll happen because he's so big. And then you draw conclusions. Oh, we're going to have to put him on a behavioral plan. I know we are, girl. Let's keep an eye out on him. And you've gone right up that ladder in 2 seconds after meeting a child. And you know what plays out? How many of you have had to support teachers who had a near heart attack in a class of 20 and found out 15 were boys? I have 15 boys. What am I gonna do? It's horrible. I need more girls. We have biases against boys. But you know what? We all have biases. Aware is halfway there. When you can bring those biases up to the surface, it makes the difference. Let me tell you about my most shameful experience with implicit bias. It happened a couple of years ago with my son. Well, it wasn't with my son, but it started because he went to Howard University. Anybody familiar with that area? It's in Washington, D.C. Originally, that campus, well, not originally, but over the years, the area surrounding the campus was very, very, very undesirable. It was deemed not a safe area. It was very difficult for my husband and I to agree to let him go there. But he grew up right here in Colorado, in Douglas County, one of the whitest, most conservative counties, one of the very few African-American children at his school. And he really wanted to go to an HBCU. As a matter of fact, Howard is where Vice President Kamala Harris went. So actually, she was his commencement speaker, now that I think about it. But he wanted to go and he needed to go, and we said, okay. But he was very safe on campus. You know, the campus embraced him. Everybody knew each other. It's a small campus. He did very well. But between his sophomore and junior year, he decided he wanted to live off campus. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. This young man by that time, created the most amazing PowerPoint and presented it to his dad and I of all the money we will save, all the advantages he will get, just really convinced us. And we said, okay. Terrified, heart still racing. But once we said, okay, I went into mama mode. I started researching. I found him a beautiful 5-bedroom house that he would share with 4 other graduate students because he's an old soul, so that was perfect for him. He went and met them. They loved him. He loved them. We're ready to sign the lease. But I wasn't comfortable yet. I needed to see this place with my own eyes. Anybody feel like that? So I flew down to Washington, D.C. so I could see this place and I could meet the people. And then we would walk the route that he would have to walk to campus because we didn't want him to take his car. So I decided to go. Now, as a side note, I want you to know that I have sensory integration processing issues. Anybody here special ed know what that is? It's the way that your body, your brain takes in information, processes it, and uses it. But the way that shows up for me as an adult is the way I get lost. When I get lost, I get very, very, very lost. Not just, oh my, where am I? It's hyperventilating, heart racing, have no idea where I am in space. Before GPSs, it always took a third party to help me get unlost because my body had to adjust. It's really a very frightening feeling. But anyway, if you've ever driven in Washington, D.C., you could understand where I'm going with this. So I get my rental car. My son's in class. I decided I'll go meet the people now. Put the address in my rental car, and the sensory integration processing issue will make sense in a minute. So I'm driving down the road, and I'm feeling really good, and I'm about to make a left turn, and I know I'm on the right street because I see the pink house. So I make my left turn, and I'm feeling real good. I see the address. I'm pulling in to park, and as I'm parking, I see a Black man standing on his porch, a rather dark, pretty large Black man. He's wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. He's not sagging, but his pants are a little low, but he had a belt on. And I took one look at this man, and in milliseconds, I went straight up the ladder. My first thought was, oh no, this area is too dangerous. My second thought was, I hope the housing office is open so I can go get his dorm room back. Milliseconds. And my third thought was, what the heck just happened? I caught myself. I said to myself, did you just look at a Black man and decide this neighborhood was too dangerous for your Black son? The shame that washed over me is indescribable. The shame and unworthiness, the embarrassment, just this wave of emotions that were so strong that I couldn't contain it. And even now my heart beats so fast and I could just burst into tears because I couldn't believe I did it. I put my hands on the steering wheel, put my head down, and I sobbed. I cried ugly, get your makeup, eyelashes off, cry. I cried because this is my life's work. And I looked at a man who literally looked like my husband and decided that because of him, the neighborhood was too dangerous for my Black son. How'd that happen to me? Nobody could have told me in a million years I could do that. And I'm just crying like, how can I even face people? How could I tell them not to be biased? And here I am looking at a Black man and I'm just crying my little eyes out. Then all of a sudden I realized I've been sitting in the car too long because I looked up and the guy was looking at me and we made eye contact and he could see I was crying and he came racing down the stairs and he goes, ma'am, he's being, are you okay? Are you okay? And I rolled down the window and I'm thinking, oh crap. All I have to do is drive off. He doesn't know me. This is a rental car. I could just leave this whole situation, but I didn't. And I'm gonna encourage you not to either when this happens to you, not if, but when. And I sat there and I thought, oh crap. I need an excuse. What's my excuse? I'm sitting here crying like an idiot and this poor man is scared and worried. I said, I'm okay, give me a minute. And he's just standing there like, what's happening? And I get myself together and I got out and he said, what's the matter? And I said, I think I'm lost because I have sensory integration processing disorder. And when I get lost, I get really lost. I mean, I'm disorientated and my heart races and I just get really, really lost. He goes, ma'am, calm down. He said, what address are you looking for? And I told him and he kind of giggled. He goes, you're right here. I'm like, phew, thank you. By this time I got it all together. And I said, thank you so much. He said, but I know what sensory integration processing looks like. Another bias. I said, you do? He goes, oh yeah, I do, but I just want you to come down and know you're okay. I said, oh, I'm okay now. I said, I feel silly. I said, my son's a student at Howard and he's going to be living here. Are you a student at Howard? And he goes, not quite. I'm a resident at the hospital attending their medical school. I'm like, oh, okay. I would have missed that, which also explains a little bit about why he might know about sensory integration stuff. But you know, he didn't have to be a future doctor. He could have been a faculty member, a Walmart worker, janitor. He could have been homeless. But what he shouldn't have been was deemed dangerous simply because he was a Black man standing on his porch. And I did that. Do you know why I did that? Because I'm biased. Because I'm influenced by all the messages. And it amazes me that I did it. Because, can I tell you a secret? I love Black men. My daddy was one, raised me, love him to death, beyond death. My uncles nurtured me and protected me. My husband, my brother, my sisters say, oh, you mess with her brother, she'll cut you up. They say he's her favorite. He is. My son, I've never had a negative experience with a Black man. How did this happen to me? We are all biased and we go straight up that ladder. But aware is halfway there. If I wasn't doing the work, if I wasn't actively engaged in bringing a bias to my awareness, let me tell you what it would have looked like. La-di-da, I'm just driving. Oh, there's the pink house. Let me turn left. Okay. Wow. Something about this neighborhood just doesn't feel right. I think I'm going to go get his dorm room back and we'll try next semester. So I want you to think about times you've gone up the ladder when did you go up? What happened? What role did implicit bias play in this? So you're going to have about 12 minutes because I talked you to death. And you're going to go into your groups, and it's going to be about 5 per group. So that'll give you about 2 minutes each and a minute extra for big talkers like me. And talk about a time that you've gone up the ladder and in what ways you've engaged in implicit bias. Remember, this is a safe space. When you go in, what happens in the breakout room stays in the breakout room unless you decide that you want to. Fair? Okay, let's go. So,
Okay.
back, you had some time in your breakout rooms, and what's happened there stays there unless you'd like to share. Is there anyone who would like to share?
I'd be comfortable sharing.
Alrighty.
Hi, I'm Cami.
Hi, Cami.
I shared that when I first started as a family sports specialist, I was actually still in college. So I was doing my senior year for my social work degree. And I had a family that I was going to enroll and work with for the year. And it was an obvious, I assumed Native American last name. And I thought this would be really interesting, a good family to work with, to learn a lot from. And the mom came in and did not look at all like what I expected. She was a person of color and had tattoos, and she didn't have a warm look on her face. And then my biases just continued. My whole biases switched, and I had to know, oh, this woman knows the system. She's just here to go through the hoops. She doesn't want to do any kind of talking to me. And I think it's been 4 years now, I think, that I've been working with this family. 4 years, and I worked with 3 of her children. And this year I recommended her for a program called Parent Ambassadors through the State Association of Head Start and ECAP, a grassroots advocacy program. I just think she'd be amazing. And she really broke down. She said, thank you for seeing something in me. She said, people always think I'm so harsh and I'm the large, angry Black lady. But I also feel like I have to be that person. And you're the only person that has made me feel that sees something different in me. And so when she said that, she started to cry, and then I started crying, and I was thinking about that bias I had, and how strong of a woman, as a woman looking at this woman, she's just a strong mother trying to do what she needs to do for her kids. And I'm so proud of all the work that she's done, and I'm impressed by her. And I also shared on the other side, as a family sports specialist, you can't see on video, but I have cerebral palsy. So I walk differently, and my speech varies, my writing varies. So sometimes I come in, I meet families, and I can immediately feel their resistance and their bias. Like they don't trust me. I've had some very awkward, rude, intrusive questions asked to me. And so it's just been a really unique experience learning. I know we're touching on racial bias, but it's been a learning experience for me in this position, and it's been interesting.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Cami. I appreciate that. Believe it or not, we have less than 15 minutes to wrap up. I am going to share my screen and continue to check the chat box. Cami, what you shared was so amazing, and so many of us have been there. So thank you for your courage in sharing that and being willing and able to grow from it. Like I said in the beginning, all of us will make mistakes. All of us will go up that ladder. And it's rare that we get an opportunity to really talk to the person about it. So that was really amazing. So thank you. So we've gone into our breakout groups. Again, aware is halfway there. And I do want you to know that we have to be aware, but we also have to be very, very, I'm going to take my camera off. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. We have to be aware that we make mistakes. We have to be very forgiving, but we also have to be willing to make things right. So I would like to make something right because I microaggressed just a few minutes ago without knowing so. When I am looking at you, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see your names or your pronouns. So I said, I'm looking at a man in a hat and a gray shirt, and they didn't respond. What I've learned is that they are non-binary and the pronouns are they, them. And I am so thankful to you, Jess, for pointing that out. When we make public infractions, it requires public apology if it's okay with the person. So I did check in with Jess, and they said, okay. So this is an example of the mistake. We all do it. We all do it. Forgive ourselves, ask for forgiveness, and do everything you can not to repeat it. Jess, will you accept my apology and know that I am growing and will do everything I can not to do that again?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's what we do. All righty. Thank you. So aware is halfway there. And every day, every single day, we must become more aware. I talked to you about preschool suspensions, and I just want you to know that this is borne out in research, that Dr. Walter Gilliam conducted some research in 2016 that found that preschool teachers judge children's behavior differently based on race. He conducted a study at a major early childhood conference. He asked teachers to watch a video clip of 4 children. The clip included a Black boy, Black girl, white boy, white girl. And he asked them to watch the video clip to try to detect challenging behaviors and anticipate challenging behaviors before they occurred. And what the participants didn't know was that eye tracking devices were being used so that they could track what children were being watched. And they also didn't know that all of the children were child actors. So there was absolutely no challenging behaviors in the clips at all. And the results showed that the little Black boy was watched more than anyone else, any other child, and 42% of the teachers said he required more of their attention. The little Black girl was watched more often than the white children least of all, and these results were true for both Black and white teachers because we're all impacted by implicit bias. So what we have to do is talk about the issues. We have to be willing to talk about it, and the first thing we have to talk about is race. We don't like to, we don't want to. It's very scary because we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to offend. We don't know what to say, who to say it to, any of that. I don't know. Do you say Hispanic? Do you say Native American? Do you say Indian? Do you say Latino? Do you say Latinx? Do you say Black? Do you say African American? My girlfriend who is Chinese will not accept that label. She is Chinese. I mean, she won't accept being Asian. She said, I'm not Asian, I am Chinese. My girlfriend who's from Afghanistan, she goes, well, I'm Asian. And you can call me Afghan if you like. We don't know what to say. So we avoid it altogether. Let me just give you a quick example. This is my family. This is my family. And I was born in 1959. I'll be turning 62 soon. Unbelievable even to me. It's like, really? And my husband's 10 years older and he'll be turning 72 this year. He was born in the segregated South. What label do you think is on his birth certificate? Was placed on his birth certificate in 1949. What race do you think it is?
Colored or Negro.
Oh my goodness, who in the world knew that?
I grew up in Florida.
Okay, my husband is colored. Every now and then I joke and say, come on over here, big old color boy. I can say that. You can't. It's really important to know what you can and cannot say. And remember, I talked about that man on the porch? Literally looked like that guy. And so in 1949, he was colored. What do you think I was in 1959?
Negro.
Absolutely, I am Negro. Nancy, thank you. So my husband in 49 was colored. In 1959, I was Negro. When my daughter was born in 1983, what do you think she is?
Black.
She is Black. I've never had anybody get it like this. I'm really impressed. What do you think my son was in 1994?
African American.
That's it. This is a family living today with 4 different labels.
Ooh.
One of my Indigenous colleagues, her grandfather's label was savage. An Indigenous person. All of these labels, please pay attention to the fact that every one of them was given to us by somebody else. People have a right to name themselves. We also don't want to talk about race because we're afraid. It feels personal. White people are afraid that they will be white shamed and blamed. People of color are afraid they'll be accused of playing the race card. People get defensive. They're not comfortable talking about these things. So we have a tendency to pretend like they don't exist or say we're all the same. I don't see color, I don't see difference, but that's not true. Every one of you noticed I was a Black woman the first time you saw me. And it's perfectly okay. Can I tell you, I've had people say, oh, Rosemarie, I don't notice you're Black. Yeah, you do, because you just said it. Yes, you do, and it's okay. I want you to notice. I want you to see me. It's really, really important that we do. I'm going to show you a little clip. Some of you have seen this before.
They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Uh-huh. Oh, no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't right here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. He was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy.
How many of you have seen the video? And it's really cute. It's amazing. And it is a perfect example for what we talk about in early childhood when we talk about serve and return. That if you talk to a baby and wait and give them a chance, they'll talk back to you. Perfect example. Now I want you to think back to when you first saw this video. And you don't have to raise your hand for this. How many of you were shocked to see a young Black man interact so positively with his son? And if you thought, wow, that's amazing, it isn't your fault because the narrative is that Black men aren't involved with their children. You all have heard that. Black men are absent. Black women are raising their children alone. Black men are just really not involved. But what would you say if I told you that Black men is the most involved with their children? Not something you hear. A father's living with, and there's another one living without. Their children are not living with their children. Those who fed or ate meals with their children daily, Black men do it the most. Bathe or diaper their children daily, look at that. Played with their children daily, really almost neck and neck with white men, or read to their children daily. Black men are the most involved with their children, but you would never know it because that's not the narrative. But also I want you to look at how involved fathers are with their kids. Are we tapping into this amazing resource? Because many fathers, especially fathers of color, anecdotally say they don't feel welcome when they pick up their children. People act like they're afraid of them. Even they don't even give information. They say, I'm going to call your wife later, or I'll call the mom later. So we have to make sure that we are engaging with dads. There's a danger of being colorblind. And I am changing my language again. The more you know, the better you do, to race neutral, because color blindness is a diagnosis and I don't want to use ableist language. So I will be changing these slides. The danger is that issues of equity are avoided. And when we engage in this race neutral behavior and belief, it promotes this fallacy that we're beyond bias and racism, and it ignores racial disparities and places blame on communities of color. And that's something we really, really, really don't want to do. But the reality is that we must talk about race. So I just want to give a little poll. We were going to go into a breakout group, but we don't have time. But I want you to begin to think about how you were taught to talk about race. So if you could pull that poll up, kind of get an idea. So here it is here. How did you talk about race in your family? Did you talk about race seldom, often, never? Were you encouraged to be colorblind most of the time, sometimes? Or how often did you talk about race? Go ahead and are you comfortable talking about race? All righty. We're going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All righty, let's end it and let's share results. So it looks like some people seldom talked about race. Some people were taught to be colorblind. Some very seldom, again. And some people are often, they are very comfortable talking about race. So did you see those results? Okay, there we are. So I know we're at time. Can I have 3 more minutes before we wrap up? All righty, I want to be respectful of your time. We have to develop comfort talking about race. So this is one of your assignments, that when you get back in your units at your job, just very casually talk about race. Say something that will require you to do this. You know, I went to this bakery and there was an African-American woman there and she had the most exquisite braids. Something, just develop a comfort in talking about race. Because again, it's not only about race, but it's always about race. And I've talked to you about implicit bias, but I want you to know that you can control implicit bias. The first thing I want you to do is notice and wonder why. Those are the 2 steps. Notice. I noticed the man standing on his porch. For some reason, I'm thinking this isn't a safe neighborhood. Notice, wonder why. But you also have to deprogram and retrain your brain. And you have to accept and expect discomfort. Oh my gosh, do you think that I was comfortable when I found out that I misgendered someone, used the wrong pronouns? Very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And I can't imagine that they were comfortable telling me. But that's where growth occurs. Expect and accept discomfort, because that's where we grow. I also want you to be very, very intentional about expanding your reality. If you listen to one news station, one radio station, expand it. Listen to others. If you only listen to CNN, listen to Fox. If you only listen to Fox, CNN, Al Jazeera, get different points of view. Expand your reality, seek opportunity positively interact with other racial groups. If you're on social media, that is a great place to start. So this is your next assignment. Look at your social media. Who do you follow? Who are your friends? What's their racial makeup? These are just some of my friends here. And it's really, really interesting because I pride myself on having a diverse group of friends. And even though I just took a snapshot here. These people are from all over the world, basically. But if you're on, I don't know about Instagram or Twitter, but even if you find that you have a diverse following or diverse friends, you know, when you look at your friend list, the ones who show up first are the ones you interact with the most. So even if you're diverse, who are you interacting with? And then you can reach out and get involved in social groups that are diverse. Why? Remember we talked about all those categories of diversity? Look at that. Do I have friends that represent who I believe I am and the diverse world I want to be a part of? So take a look at that and join groups. I saw that some of you had read CAST. Follow Isabel Wilkerson. Follow diverse authors, because once you click follow, then social media will give you lots and lots of suggestions. So follow them. And also share your non-biased anti-racist beliefs with those in your network. And next session, we're going to talk about how you do that and what you say to people in situations where you're trying to share and people aren't receptive. And then stand up to biased and racist individuals to make the implicit explicit. And everything that we've talked about must be implemented in the context of positive, nurturing, and supportive relationships. Whew. So there we are. Thank you for the extra 5 minutes. And I just want to take any questions that you have if you're willing to ask, and then I'll turn it back over to Exeloria and to Jess. All right, so thank you all. Thank you. The honor is mine. We have another session coming up. Do you want to talk about the date? Okay.
Oh, the date. That's a great question. It's, I believe it's March 19th, same time, same place. Well, not really. We are going to get a Zoom link. Will come out probably the week of the webinar. And we had lots of questions about recordings, and we are working on getting the recordings formatted so that they can be posted on the webpage. So they are coming. And I think that's it. So lovely to see everyone. It was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Allen, for being with us again. And we will see all of you next time. Bye. Have a great rest of your day.
All righty. Bye, everyone.